of the really difficult problems that knowledge management has had is how do we actually transfer the knowledge that one expert has to people that need it? And people have tried a lot of ways to do that that haven't worked very well, like recording people or exit interviews and things. But there is a process that I call see, do, teach that I think really works well. And let me just illustrate that process for a minute, and then I'll go through each of those pieces so you can see what they're like. Just imagine that you are a great facilitator, and you've got a whole group of people that really would like to learn to be as great as you are. Or maybe you're a great salesperson, or you're a great testing engineer, whatever you are. But let's say you're a facilitator. The see, do, teach process would pair you with a learner, and that learner would shadow you, would follow you, and watch you as you do the facilitation, watch you as you prepare for the facilitation, watch you afterwards and talk with you. So you would they would be sitting in the back of the room. They would be making notes to themselves about what you did. They would be watching when you stand, when you sit. They would notice how you handle questions. When somebody gets kind of rude, they'd see how do you do that. They would be watching all of that. And then they would have a time to sit down and talk with you. You can imagine how much more effective that is than reading a book about facilitation or having a short video facilitation. So that's what this process is. It has three parts. The first is the one I've just described, and that's the see. And so you have a shadow person that follows you, and they need to see you many times, not just once, because every time you do that, new ideas come up. So they would follow you for whatever is an appropriate period of time. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 10 examples, but they would follow you. And after the following, because each of these see, do, teach has two parts, so that over lunch or in the evening, you'd sit down with that person and you would work through what you did, and they would ask questions and they would be able to get at the reasoning behind each thing that you did. That's the first process, see. Now the do is exactly like that, only now you are in the driver's seat. You are doing the facilitation. You've watched it a bunch of times. You're ready to do it yourself. You're doing the facilitation, and that expert is sitting in the back of the room watching. And then again, when that's over, you have the same kind of a conversation. Really, you're saying, here's what I did. The expert is saying, why'd you do it that way, and so forth. So there is each time a time for reflection, trying to get at reasoning and understanding. Then the third process is really an interesting one, because now after you and the expert have decided you're good enough, you did a great job in the facilitation in your do stage, then you become the expert and someone joins you as an observer. And now you have that wonderful process of teaching someone else. And we know how really helpful it is to try to teach something, because you learn so much when you're explaining something to someone else. So now they're observing you. You have the same kind of reflection period afterwards. Again, it might be a week of observing. It might be 10 days of observing. It might be one day every week, whatever the interval is. It would differ for different kinds of tasks. So that's see, do, teach.
You had mentioned in a discussion that there's training that the learner and the expert receives in how to ask questions that draw out tacit knowledge and ways to provide reasoning. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. The training starts with getting a group of experts together. Let's say there are 5 experts or 15 experts, not a huge group, but a group of experts together, and ask them to tell stories about some of the most unusual situations they've had. So that's where we get the content for the training. And in that storytelling, you're doing some recording, some videoing, and so forth. But you're getting what are the really issues. And you want that rather than the usual things that happen. Because the usual things that happen, people don't need training on. They need training on those outliers. So that's the first thing to get the content. And then the actual process is to bring learners and experts together. People are going to do the shadowing, people that are going to be the expert and be shadowed together. And each of them need a different kind of help. The expert needs the help in how do I talk about my reasoning. And so we practice that, and we use Ardress's left and right-hand column cases, if you're familiar with that, which is the dialogue actually written out what I said, what the other person said. And we use a case like that so that the expert can practice saying, all right, you can see what the expert said in the dialogue, and then the learner asks them, okay, why did you say it this way? Why didn't you say that? And the expert then can talk about their reasoning. We help them talk about it in terms of concrete examples, different situations they've been in where that happened. So they learn about how do I provide the reasoning that's really helpful to the learner. At the same time, the learner is learning about how do I ask those questions. What questions do can I ask? And again, it's mostly about reasoning questions. So that's that's how the training goes. Is both of them practicing using right and left hand cases about how we do that practice of asking questions with real situations that we got from the experts. And that's usually a couple of days of training. Really very helpful.
After each engagement between the learner and the expert, there's a debrief. Is there a specific way that these debriefs happen?
Yes, the way I really prefer actually follows the after-action review, if you're familiar with that, where you start out with what was the objective, and then what did we actually do, and then what did we learn from that. So I use that format to do it with. So even before the shadow person joins the expert says to the shadow person, here's the objective of what I'm going to do on this sales call or in this meeting. So there is an objective. So when we get to the debrief, the expert reiterates the objective. This is what I tried to do. And then the learner lists out all the things that they saw that they were important, that they saw as being important. Makes a list of those. You can imagine the two of them sitting together, and there's this whiteboard, and they're making a joint list. The expert adds things that the learner didn't think of on that list, and then they go down that list one at a time with the learner asking questions, the why questions about why did you do this? How did you know this was the right thing to do? Why didn't you do something else? And so they go down it that way. Then the learner says, okay, out of this session, this reflection, they summarize, here's what I think I learned. And the expert listens to that, and then the expert says, and you know, here's what I would do differently another time, because even the expert has ideas, and the expert learns in this process. So they have ideas about, you know, I might have tried this, or it might have worked better if I'd done that. So that's the general format of the debrief.
My last question is, how do you know when you're done? How do the learner and the expert confirm the competency of the learner?
Well, there are several ways to confirm the competency of the learner. First of all is the results. So if the facilitator, did the meeting go well? Did we get the results out of the meeting? If I'm a salesperson, did I engage the customer? Is the customer going to buy, or at least are they very interested? So the first is the results. But we can't go on results alone, because sometimes, even if you're an expert, the results don't come. So we can't rely just on that. But it's still a very important piece. And I want to add to that it's not copying what the expert would have done, because the learner has to draw on their own tacit knowledge to bring out and embed that in what they're doing. So it's not, did you do it exactly like I would do it, but did you do it in a way that got the results we wanted? So that's the first piece. The second piece then is the reasoning of the learner now solid? So do they have an understanding of why they did something, not just that they did it? So that's the second test, is the reasoning there behind the actions that the person took. And the third one has to do with confidence. That's an interesting one because Bandura, who developed social learning theory, and this is all based on, says that if you are more confident, you are more likely to succeed because you have more brain space in which to think about what you're doing than if you're not confident, when you're thinking to yourself all the time, oh gee, that wasn't right, I wonder if he's going to stay with me, that kind of thing. So the level of confidence that the person has, and there are very simple tests that you can ask a person before they start or after they finish. How confident were you about how you were going to approach this? So that's the third criteria. So those are the three: the result the person got when they did the do process, their reasoning, do they now have good theory behind what they're doing? Do they have good theory? And three is their level of confidence.
Now, is there anything about this process that I should have asked you that I didn't?
The one thing that comes to mind for me is I think who is going to be the shadow is an important question. We don't want a beginner. We don't want someone that's, if it's a salesperson, we don't want someone that's never done sales. We want that salesperson that's really pretty good, but not expert. Or if it's a facilitator, we want someone who, not someone who's never facilitated, who doesn't even know the beginnings how to do that. We want someone who's a pretty good facilitator, because that's where we can move them to expertise. Many of the other pieces of it, the getting the basics, can probably be done mostly through training and reading. And even the getting competent can be learned often simply by doing it yourself and learning from trial and error. But the expertise, that we can use this see, do, teach process for. So choosing those people, Dorothy Leonard, who talks about this idea, she calls them nextperts. So NEXPERTS, which is kind of a cute term, I think. But it's first those people that are getting close to being an expert, but haven't got that last 10 to 15% that's really going to make them exceptional.
Very good, Nancy. Thank you so much. That was very informative, and I'm looking forward to getting the word out about it. Thank you.
You're most welcome. I enjoyed talking about it, Lynn.